you guys can hear me. Feel free to send a message in the chat or something. If you can't hear me, my name's Taylor Rock. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm excited to be gathered here today to hear about the To Swim and Speak with Salmon presentation. I'd encourage you all that are present and on Zoom to stand up briefly if you're able, and to turn to your neighbor and greet them and say hello. Give them a handshake, fist bump, elbow bump. We'll get friendly, get to know your community. Awesome. Thank you all for taking the time to get to know your community a little bit. It's always great in the Yukon to find those small town connections, big and far. I'd love to hand it over to our crew. Today we have Jared, Zakayla, and Emily with us to talk about some maybe youth training program idea and experiences, and we'll have like a large kind of Q&A interactive portion, so don't be shy. You just got to know your neighbors. It's time to share with them, okay? All right, I'll give it up to the crew.
Sure. Just for how to hear us online.
Do I bring this over?
I don't think it'll reach. You'll have to come.
Can I unmute this computer?
Like, would that work?
It's better if you go into the mic so people on Zoom here and be recorded through the mic.
This might, I think it has enough slack to go across. We can test it, Jared, for you.
Oh, wow.
Come with me, Zoom people. There you go.
Okay. Something I want to work thank you. So we're talking about this structures advocacy training program, which is using Salmon. It's primarily based in Yukon. We did like a little bit of introduction exercise. So I'm Jared Bennett. I'm an infection for this program. I'm here at Lincoln, Stigers First Nation, also has some DNA ancestry in there. Many other things behind, just out of the north. EM, all those other things. I've belonged to multiple different communities. Probably the biggest ones would be the Tarkos Tigers Appen and Fort the Art and NWT. What else makes me unique? That's a hard question. What else makes me unique? I like running.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Ross. I use she, her pronouns. I am a settler of British, Danish, and Dutch descent, and I was born and raised here on Holland and Castle land. I feel very connected to this place. I care very deeply about this community and about the Yukon. But I think, yeah, with that comes also recognizing my position at Liberty and how my ancestors came to be here and what that means for the responsibilities that I hold today in this place. And I think in terms of what else makes me move, I love to learn things. That's a big part about me. And I really love music and sharing things through music as well.
Hello everybody, my name is Zakayla. My pronouns are she, her. Never had to really have that worry of like, who am I, what am I doing? Which is such a blessing because we have so many other people struggling with identity crises and all these other things. So, what else was I saying? Oh, no, it's loud. Yeah, so that's definitely what makes me is my community and my culture.
I'm sorry, just broadly too, is like I'm the sort of the main administrative lead, kind of an ED role in the program, and these are two. Speak louder. Okay, I'll pretend I'm speaking to an elder. And then, here's two of our amazing youth that are going to be in the program for a few years. And I'll give a quick rundown of the program. There's so many tech issues in the room. It's very... So some of the program goals as we go through this so the program length is about 3 years. And as we're working through this program, some of the goals are reconnecting youth with that ancestral knowledge and cultural practices, recognizing that with some of the declines in salmon and not like declines in fish camps, we can't get out there, we can't learn from salmon, we can't experience salmon as they used to be, we can't sit with elders in those salmon camps and pass on salmon stories. So having to be really intentional about passing on that knowledge and sort of instilling it in the youth that are part of the program, and then from that, like a little bit wider in the Yukon. And of course, anybody in the program, we're going to be fostering youth leadership or young leader leadership and like training how they can go into advocacy, that's sort of like steps in and out of government processes. And of course, promoting emotional and spiritual growth. Too often when we're talking about training people, we kind of miss that emotional spiritual element. Just, what are the skills we can train people? But really, like, what are those spiritual skills? What are the ceremonies we can bring in? What are the ceremonies we can teach the youth that potentially they could then eventually lead one day when they're baby elders and older elders? And then a little bit more, like, what are building some of the skills in the youth that are part of the program for their long-term employment, for sustainability, recognizing this isn't the end of things. And centering salmon in everything we do, like wanting to keep salmon alive, want to keep salmon relatives alive and flourishing. Sort of some of those goals are like program values, so like as we're working through this, how do we call each other into proper relations? I think it's like a good way to think about that we're working through. So, as we're going through the program, learning together, experiencing things together, how do we practice sort of kindness? And you can think about this in like lateral kindness training, but even more deeper, like how do you be, sorry. Sorry, I'm very naturally soft-spoken, so it feels like I'm yelling at people when I'm, so how do we practice radical kindness? How do we practice that lateral kindness in everything we do? And bring it into how we relate with one another, but also relate with people we're working with. And then, of course, through the Yukon, and often elders talk about respect, share, care in teaching, and how do you apply that to everything? How do you apply it to the way we work together, how we learn what we're learning, some of the values we kind of be practicing throughout this. I often think about these values as if you're living in a Western society, people can think about justice and how they love justice, how they love independence. And you're taught that from, a little wee whippersnapper growing up. So you don't even have to think about it. But some like these values here, like you have to be very intentional and like think about them and sit with elders and sit with yourself as you're going through it and learning about it. So general program outline. So I'm being very quick about this because we'll get into like a little bit more like question and answer period, a little bit more interactive. I think it's sort of our vibe as we go through or like how we operate. So it's about a 3-year program. We'll have a monthly training setting up, and those things will be like media training. I'm looking at Kate, our program coordinator, in case I miss anything she could say. Killing it. Media training, leadership training, strength-based leadership training, figuring out like what's the strengths of all the individuals in the program as they think about their own leadership styles. There's a couple of different jokes there about my leadership styles, but I'll leave it. And then traveling. So there's tons of conferences, tons of different communities we can travel to and learn about different things. So as an example, in a month, we'll be going to the Pacific Salmon Foundation Conference to learn everything about salmon and everything about salmon in BC and how that might be applied to the Yukon. So a lot of the youth will be there. Zakayla will be at a Zach Bryan concert, which is just as important, I feel like. Yeah. And then, of course, connecting with the youth about what are their own independent interests. Like what would they like to do? Like getting at like what are your strengths and how can we help you reach those strengths? So that everybody will have different strengths. Somebody really good at speaking out, Some will be really good at writing, some people are really good at organizing, and how can we build that within the youth themselves? And of course, just checking in every month in building a bit of a peer network. And so this program too is applied along the whole Yukon River drainage basin. So we have a few different Alaska participants, and we're hoping to build those relationships between people along the Yukon River drainage basin, so we could like share culture back and forth, share relationships back and forth, recognizing salmon sort of affect all of us along the whole Yukon River and into the ocean too. So we have to like have those connections strong if we want to work for salmon on more of a grassroots level. Some of those teaching methods that we've been talking about, and this is over like months of conversations, and we've had gatherings with key salmon leaders in the Yukon, like figuring out what would a salmon advocate need to learn about, need to like experience, and how could they do that? So one of the big ones is like hands-on experiential learning. So for example, we're hoping to go to Bristol Bay. In Bristol Bay, they still have strong salmon camps. They still can like work with salmon for multiple days at a time, taking them out of the river, filleting them, cleaning them. And like there's things you learn from that experience which you can't learn like any other way. So be able to go to where salmon are still strong and say, oh, we want salmon to be strong here too one day. So having that vision in mind, learning cultural protocols and spiritual teachings and being really intentional about that. You know, a couple of really good key cultural or spiritual teachers I see down here would be like Colleen James is very good at this. Mark Wedge is very good. Like people like that who can like sit and think about spirituality and then, you know, teach it in a good way. And of course, that place-based learning that is always going to be a little bit different in each community, and there's going to be different knowledges alive or available in each community or different stories. So really leaning into that, recognizing that. And of course, mentorship and leadership. That's just like there's connections. As you connect with somebody who has already been like living this, you're just going to learn more. Some of the things we've been doing or hope to do in the coming months, we're going to do some leadership and public speaking training with somebody named Ashley Cummings. She's a young youth, kind of a leading expert and working on this forever. As I mentioned, we're going to go into the BC Salmon Recovery and Resilience Conference in Vancouver and just learning everything about salmon in the BC, kind of getting that knowledge and be able to share it too. We'll collect this and grab as many pamphlets as we can for Zakayla and talk all about it with her afterwards. And then like that monthly cohort Zoom meeting, gathering, just building those relationships between people, because, you know, relationships and this work is just so incredibly important in all our work, I'd say. Then of course, near the end of the year is having some sort of outdoor fun activity, recognizing. So there's a bit of another teaching sort of, I want to say pedagogy, but it's kind of a big word. Just a way of looking at different teachings and like recognizing that you, as I mentioned, have to be teaching an emotional, spiritual, physical, and the mental sides. So you need to like make sure we're having that physical side, like getting out there and being outdoors and taking care of ourselves like that, in that way. Some of the things that have happened so far, and so we did a lot of, in the summer of 2024, like a lot of youth recruitment, a lot of like interviewing with youth and who can be part of this cohort, who can we help through everything we've been talking about. And so far there's 9 youth in the program. We're still keen to keep recruiting on some of the language groups we don't have good representation on. We're not really going nation-based, we're going more like, what are the big family and language groups in the Yukon and in Alaska that we can get key reps in for youth? And we had a July 24th, sort of a month after the Victoria Gold accident or disaster, hosted a ceremony along the Yukon River and honoring our relations to water and fish. With a week-long workshop in September. It was the first real big in-person gathering. We had about 7 7 of the youth, 6 of the youth there, something like that. And it was, just different teachings from a lot of, I say, experts in advocacy and Indigenous leadership. And then we had emotional competency training from somebody named Dr. Lee Brown, who's a really big advocate of like, in these spaces, you need to be really intentional about teaching emotion and like being emotionally, like recognizing your own emotions and how they affect you, which is great. So I might let you riff a little bit too, if you want to mention anything about the week-long workshop, how you felt about it, and like your own connections or why you're in the program.
Okay. Yeah, I think like thinking back to sort of what we've done in this program so far, and particularly this first week-long training, what really stands out to me is the relationship building. And this is a big part of why I was drawn to this program as well. I feel very honored to have been invited into this space. This is an Indigenous-led program. We're focusing on place-based knowledge and traditional teachings, and I take none of that lightly as a settler on these lands to be able to come into these spaces, and so I'm very grateful. I think for me, a big part of this work is also building my own relationship with salmon and with water, with the land. I think growing up, I felt like someone who was very like connected to nature. And sort of as I've started to like unlearn parts of this Western worldview that I was kind of socialized in, I've realized that what I thought was connection was actually like quite shallow. And there's a lot of like knowledge missing for me, and I think for other folks in my circles. And so that's kind of like the first part for me, is starting this like baby relationship that I have with salmon and with the land. And then also building relationships with other youth and with community. I think this was like a really big part of our first week-long gathering. And I think like it's not without challenges either. I think a lot of programs, a lot of kinds of things that are happening these days are quite like centered in the dominant Western worldview, which, I've had experience with, where it's like, okay, we're giving you this task and a goal, and you're gonna accomplish this and this and this. And that's kind of where you're starting from. There's not enough space to actually like build relationship with one another, and work and sort of like think about things in different and more complex ways, because you're so focused on like this task. And so I think, it's challenging to try to build something like this, which is very centered in relationality. So for me, that was like both what drew me in and also what I felt like we were really focusing on in the first week. And I'm very grateful that this is a group of people that doesn't shy away from that challenge, and that isn't sort of like throwing in the towel just when there are like bumps in the road. We're all really committing to sort of working through those things together. And I think Jared was showing earlier some of the core values of the program. I think that, those are not just sort of things that we embody, but it's an active process of, okay, what does radical kindness look like in this situation, or over here, or when this thing happens? What does it look like to really live into those values? And that's something that we're actively figuring out together.
Very well said. So I'll talk a little bit about the week-long workshop we had, and during that time, we spoke to about 5, I want to say maybe more people. There was definitely more people, but 5 is for sure what I remember, and just knowledge keepers and elders around the community, and that was really beneficial for our, team building and kind of, I think, understanding each other more too, because topics were brought up that were a little bit difficult to talk about, or I I guess some were just learning for the first time too. So we really kind of got to learn and know each other on more, not even deeper level, but just like, or I don't know, more, what's the word? Yeah, anyways, though, so it was really crucial for our team building for sure. And now I'm very close with most of the people in this program. Yeah, I have more to say about when the next slide, I think. Too.
Do you mean this slide? Do you want to talk about the community? Let me just get new October. Yeah, no, that'd be good. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move right to it. I would also like to have it in front of me. So one of the members from the team who's not here today, Carissa, she is also part of Reconnection Vision, which is, I don't really know too much about Reconnection Vision, but their big goal is like to reconnect human with land and, you know, bring back the culture and the connection there because it's so lost. So Carissa and I were there and I spoke at the Assembly of First Nations Climate Change. It was the 3rd annual one. And this program was just kind of starting up, so I was limited on information I was able to share to everyone there. But what we kind of came across was just how important it is to have these fish camps for the elders to be able to have these food sources. You know, there's a big health increase and stuff too with diabetes and all sorts of other things. And this is really because we're not able to have or practice our cultural practices and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of more what I talked about there. Yeah, and Swim and Speak with the Salmon is still just starting up. So I got more learning to do for sure, but it's going really good. And the outcomes we've had so far is I think just we all kind of feel seen in this group, and which is uplifting and kind of, because sometimes hope isn't like, I don't know, hope can only be so much.
Yeah, so thinking about the next stages of the program is really building a lot more structure within the program, because, you know, talking about all these things is great, but it does take a lot of planning. Louder. I'm getting the call. The next stage in the program is really thinking about building a lot more structure around everything we're talking about, because it takes a lot of planning and organization to really do any of this stuff, and like thinking about it in a different way. One thing that really hasn't got emphasized quite yet is the real strong focus on mental health, recognizing as, you know, working through advocacy spaces, working through building relationships, working with an Indigenous-led program, working with Indigenous people. Okay, and you're often working with people, you know, dealing with mental health crises, problems. We're working with like communities who are facing a lot of this. So needing an emphasis in anything like this about what are the supports for mental health. And maybe one final thing we'll touch on is during the week-long workshop, the young leaders did get together and talk about like how do we want to exist together as a community, and drafting out some of that community agreement. I mean, I could read them out or you can look at them, but do either of you want to talk to that? What it means to you maybe is like.
Well, I think, like, I only have one kind of to bring up. It's like more of the supporting each other and, you know, standing with each other. That was something that was like I think we wrote it down like 2 or 3 times accidentally on the thing, but it was just like, you know, supporting one another. Even if you're not agreeing, like still, I guess, having more of an open mind to just, yeah, figure it out. So that was the big thing.
Yeah, that culture of care.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's one on here. Being able to swim in our separate streams is the 3rd one. I just wanted to explain that one a little bit because it's maybe not as immediately clear, but we were thinking about that in a couple of ways. I think first that like everyone is bringing different skills and gifts to this program. And so sort of like focusing on empowering each person to be able to take on the leadership roles that feel best to them and to be able to do the work that they're sort of called to do. And yeah, this work can take place in like a lot of different kinds of spaces in a lot of different ways, whether it's like through social media or public speaking, or maybe you want to like organize rallies or liaise with the government. Like there's a lot of different places that this work needs to happen. And so sort of just supporting one another in our different skill sets. And then I think also recognizing the different positionalities of everyone in this group, and that not every space is going to be for every person. And so I think for like the non-Indigenous folks in this group, just sort of always holding the questions of like, is this a space for me right now? Is this a place for me to speak? Is this knowledge for me? And if not, then being able to find another way that is acting in solidarity and not taking space from Indigenous youth in the program.
Great. I think we'll open up to questions now.
I'll warm it up with a question. I have a question. So for your youth recruitment, how does one youth get recruited? Do you guys have like a website? Can we DM you? What's the sitch? Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, we're trying to focus on family groups, language groups we don't have a strong representation from. So is that the Dawson I hear? We don't have strong representations from Dawson. So we're looking for a youth from Dawson, if that is the Dawson table up there. Yeah, and then what else? I think a little bit more inland Tlingit representation. Yeah, potentially Casca. Definitely, you can email us to talk about that. But yeah. So there was, when it first started, there was an application with a deadline, and people would go to the application. It was a Google form. There'd be a few different questions they'd answer, and then there'd be an interview, and then they'd be accepted or not. Because when you get into the program, there is a lot of resources that kind of funnel towards different people. So we only have limited spots, and that's the same thing going forward. But the thought would being like, if somebody applies, you'd have to answer a set of questions and get interviewed, and either like if we have space, if it's like the right fit, because we do want to maintain like this community agreement aspect. We do want people in the program who are going to fit well with everybody, recognizing like these people are going to be working together for 3 years. Like that's a big commitment too. I guess one note as well is there will be another part of the program where people will be invited if they're available. So I'll explain that a bit better. If you're like an Indigenous youth, maybe you can't commit for the full time, maybe there'll be free trainings available that you could join. So like there's sort of like a mailing list that Indigenous youth can join.
Awesome. That answered my question, except I have one follow-up. So if I were a youth in Dawson and I wanted to find you, can I Google the name of your organization and find you or email?
Can you Google? Yeah, Facebook is the easiest. Or Instagram. Yeah.
Thank you. So Dawson Youth, to swim and speak with Salmon, Instagram, Facebook, hit them up, okay? We have some more questions.
Hello.
Oh. Hello.
Hi, I'm Ruth Wright, Van Tutquichin, Old Crow. I was just wondering if a youth and an elder from Old Crow would be able to go down for the week-long program.
So you want to talk?
Well,
It looks like you
my
want.
big thing is
So there was a week-long workshop that did happen, and the there was representation there. Yeah, from Okro. Yeah,
But there will, I want to explain that there will be future trainings. And
yeah, but the,
DM you or Facebook message you to be on your roster or something for later?
yeah, yeah.
say that again because they didn't hear it in the mic.
They can.
Speak
You
louder,
can.
please.
So basically, the week-long program that we had was in September, I believe. So that is already in the past tense, but there will be upcoming training and stuff like that. And for the youth, absolutely. But I feel like for the elder, it'd be more of like there to kind of share and be more of a knowledge keeper because we are youth-based, right? And we also, at the week-long program that we had in September, we had Norma Cassie there to be our elder from Old Crow. So we did have that representation. Sorry, that word always gets me. But yes, there will be more in the future to come type of thing.
Awesome. So my understanding is you could follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and keep your eyes out for more opportunities. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, and what about the one in BC?
Oh, true.
So the BC one is for participants already in the program, just recognizing that it takes like quite a lot of resources and planning to get them down. So, but there will be other opportunities. Like the more you get involved with the program, the more we can help. But like we're doing fundraising as well. So there's questions in the room.
Alrighty, to the next question. I had some hands over here.
I'd just like to say that I'm pretty interested in the program, and like how much time do you dedicate to whatever files you deal with or projects? That's what I'm wondering.
Okay, do you want to go back to that slide with the structure? Is this the one that has, yes,
Program.
yeah.
Do you want to say?
Sure.
It seems like yeah, like
Okay, well, no, just, so I think we're still, like, the structure, I think, is still kind of emerging, but my understanding is that there's going to be a monthly training, so like a few hours a month, kind of like maybe a monthly Zoom call. What has been explained to us is that this isn't intended to be like a part-time job or anything that requires like that much capacity. It's supposed to be very accessible for folks who are doing like other work. So yeah, I think like something every month, and then these like travel opportunities as they arise, kind of. Does that help? Okay. Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that it's very like flexible if you can't make a monthly, like you.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible for that. So at the very least, it'd be like one monthly training and then like a meeting 1 month or meeting for in the month too, just with the cohort and like building those relationships. So kind of like a skills-based thing and then a relationship-based thing. And then probably there'll be big trips will be planned. So for, next summer, we're hopefully going to Bristol Bay, maybe one other big one, and that'll be like maybe about 10 days. Like we're sorting out the time and dates for that right now. And then there'll probably be in the third year, another big trip like that. And potentially within that, maybe another like week-long workshop focused on some of the skills, but also relationship building. Yeah. And for all that, it's all paid too, which is also another why there's a reason for like interviews and want to be very intentional about how we place our resources and to like spread them out across the Yukon.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question. Moving on to the next question. We've got about 5 minutes here.
I think I can do it without it.
Okay. For the Zoom people, it doesn't actually have like example.
Okay, okay. So I am from the traditional lands of Ajuan, which is Southeast Alaska, 12 miles north of Juneau. What I would like to know, besides Bristol Bay, if you are involved with Tlingit Haida Anchorage, Tlingit Haida Juneau, especially regarding the salmon. If you need some help to get involved, let me know. So are you?
We love community connection.
Conversations. There's a little bit of conversations with like that region. I have a lot of connections that with Tlingit Haida. Yeah, that's potentially one of the trips. Going to Juneau, going to those salmon runs there, talking with some of the Tlingit Haida, for sure, would love. So like let's talk.
Global Fisheries also has a great capacity in Juneau, especially for something like the salmon research. That is exactly what we do. Check it out.
So I just recently attended a Indigenous conservation forum in Vancouver, like I think 2-3 weeks ago now, and I actually made lots of connections with the Haida girls there, which are beautiful people. So that is definitely like on my personal list. And then we also have Paul, who's working with Jared, basically more up there, but he also has lots of connections from the Haida Gwaii area. So I do personally hope that we are in or connection with them. And then for your question too, we only have 2 men part of our group, so we would definitely be happy to have another man. To have that, more to have that kind of like, I guess, what is it called? Yeah.
Yeah. More gender diversity, more outside of the gender binary would be great. Awesome. And I saw some like hands over here maybe earlier. No? This is maybe perfect timing unless anyone online has any more questions. My online friends? Hello? Okay, I will take that as we're done. I'd like to thank you guys so much for coming out. It's great to see youth involved and building capacity, and it seems like your organization is really looking at lots of facets of what building capacity for youth look like, and that's super exciting to see. I'm super stoked about it. I'll be following you guys on Instagram and Facebook. I'll be proclaiming for the Yukon diversity to see if I know any youth who might be for that. And I'd just like to thank you again for your time, and it's incredible. We're about to break for lunch. I will just let you know that lunch is in the cafeteria. Thank you to the Yukon culinary team at Yukon U. And also we'll be back at 1:15. You could join me here. You could join a different group with the other MCs. It's up to you. But I'd like to thank you all for participating and being engaged and getting to know one another and sharing together. Thank you.